it's been a year since my last video, which is shameful because all I've really done is connected 4 wires. I added idle air controller since the MS2 upgrade includes the hardware and the software to be able to control the idle air control stepper motor. So it's 4 wires there. I made my best guess about what to connect. And playing around with the ECU, it seems like it works. I'll show you that next. And then hopefully today we can get the thing to actually idle down so we can hear the lope of the camshaft, or the chop if you're Zach from Hoonigan. Yeah, right now the fuel pump is disconnected, so let me get the Tuner Studio up and running and we'll take a look at that. That buzzing noise you heard was the idle air controller. Startup idle. Went to idle control, set for stepper. Open loop warm up. Step size 3 milliseconds. I played with that up and down, and I think at 1 millisecond it just buzzed and didn't move. At 2 milliseconds it seemed reliable, so I just bumped it up to 3. I don't imagine this needs to move super quick to be able to give you an idle. Especially with this tame of a cam. This is like a 220-ish duration intake at 50 thousandths. Initial step time 5 milliseconds, so we just give it a little bit longer to get turning in the beginning. 385 homing steps. For LS motors I keep seeing 250 is the number you're supposed to use, but I'll show you how I came to that number. The rest of this I haven't figured out what to do with yet, so we'll move on. I went to test mode. So output test mode, idle valve. Homing steps I gave 385 with 250 that everybody recommended. I could run this number way out, try homing, and I didn't hear it bottom out. So right now you should hear nothing but a buzz from it bottoming out. Alright, and then if I set my idle valve to the, like this is the most open position I can get without hearing it bottom out at the other end and buzz. So I heard it moving, here at home with hardly any buzzing at all. I don't think it buzzed against the stop, so one more. All kind of buzzing. If I bring this up to, let's say, 390, and we try to run it to that position, I think it bottoms out. Yep, I just heard a little bit of buzzing. And I heard a little buzzing right at the end there, so those are the extents that I've gotten with my 1999 truck intake. I don't know what's right. I'm assuming that you don't need to get anywhere near wide open to run one of these things. In fact, I'm going to change this down to like 20 so that if I'm running the engine I don't accidentally run it up to 3,000 or 4,000 RPM. Not that I know how high it would rev, but I just don't want to take the chance. Under startup and idle cranking duty and warm-up duty. While you're cranking, there's a plot of temperature versus steps for the idle air controller. I'm pretty sure I lowered all these from what I had in the last video. I don't know if it's low enough. Looks like temperature right now is a little below 56 degrees. When you start the engine, it goes to a more open position for a few seconds and then drops down to this warm-up position. So this is one based on temperature that's always running. So these steps should be a little bit less than what you saw in the last screen. Looks like right now we're sitting 64 to 70, somewhere in between there for idle steps. Temperature somewhere between 42 and 60, closer to 42, so that sounds about right. Alright. And rather than try to tune that today, I think all I want to do is just go into the idle test mode and set a position and maybe run it up and see if I can get to a nice steady idle with a little bit of cam chop. Alright, the other thing that didn't seem right to me last time was there was a lot of black smoke. That could be a warm-up thing, or maybe it's my VE table. Like maybe I just need to grab a section down here and lean it out a bit to see what it likes for idling, but I don't know if we'll have enough time on that. I don't have a radiator hooked up. Let's see if I can find the warm-up. This is probably it. After start enrichment. Warm-up enrichment. That's the one. So this multiplies a bit for your fuel when you're cool, so I'd be doing something like 150% of fuel here. That seems high, but I don't know. I haven't played with the engine long enough to know what it likes. I just know I saw a lot of black smoke when it fired up. I could zero this out, but I don't think I want to do that, because it did start and it ran, so maybe I just get it running and play with it. It's going to be loud. There's no exhaust, no mufflers, no O2 sensor, so I'll be sitting right behind the manifold outlets. Not ideal, but I'm going to have to wear these to keep things a little quiet. Let me focus on the smell of the exhaust for O2 tuning. Plugged in the fuel pump. I put a little bit of gas in the can over there, but I'm going to just turn the ignition on a couple times, let it prime, get some pressure in the rails and see if anything's leaking. It's been all winter. I don't know if some mice have tried to chew through this stuff, so let's see what happens. I don't hear the fuel pump at all. Let me check that fuse. Fuel pump fuse was fine. I forgot this is a stock fuel pump, so you can't hear it pretty much. I had to go to a test mode and turn it on, and then I could hear fuel and air squirting around in the rails, which means I didn't have enough fuel, so put some gas, more gas in the can, and it's still making a noise, but I don't think there's as many bubbles. I think I've got a fuel injector stuck. Apparently it's a bad thing to do, to start these things up just to hear it run and then shut it off for a year. I might have a bad injector, maybe it'll break loose again, I don't know. But I've got this truck with the same engine, different injectors, stock injectors, but I'll leave that not running for 8-10 months at a time and then fire it up and go do some work with it. I played with the idle air control. It didn't seem to make much effect. It's still running way up high in the RPMs. I need to do a data log so I can go back and look at it later this time. But I'm going to spray a bit of this around the intake and see if we can hear any change in revs. Maybe find an intake leak, because I believe that's going to be the problem. There's probably a massive leak somewhere, and I'll go, oh yeah, I should have done that. Possible spots I've got, this is the brake booster. There's a cork in it, or a rubber stopper. The PCV is hooked up to a PCV valve. I shook it, I can hear it rattling, so I think it's supposed to be that way. Other than that, I don't know where it could be leaking, so maybe there's a huge hole and I'll find it. Let's see. I forgot the data log, so we'll try that next. There we go. I'm not sure what the no fuel cut thing down here is trying to tell me, but that kept on flashing and blinking, and I could see ignition advance running up and down. Don't really know what's going on here. I'll have to go back and look at it. Let's open up the log. I 3,500 RPM, that's kind of high for idle. I did learn one thing, my fuel, the white and red here. So right here I've got, let's see, while we were running kind of steady, pulse width was 1.59 milliseconds, but here it was 0. So I believe that no fuel cut thing was just saying it went into fuel cut to save itself. I don't know what safety I tripped, but still working on it. I think I figured a couple of things out. Number one, the fuel cut, overrun fuel cut is on when RPM is greater than 1500 RPM and the map is lower than 35 kPa, which were both true. TPS lower than 1%, that was true. Coolant higher than 90, and the last time I did this, I'm sure coolant got over 90 last time too. Delay, so 1.5 seconds, and return to running when the RPM gets down to 1100 RPM. So let's check that out. 0.034 seconds. So if we add 1.5 to that, we'd be at 1.534. That's just about where it cut off. That explains the fuel cut, I think. The other thing I learned was I went to the test mode again and was checking out by setting different positions here and blowing into the brake booster hose and listening at the throttle. It turns out my idle stepper is running the wrong direction, so I was basically running it wide open. So now I'm going to try running it at, let's say 365 and see what happens when I set that. Alright, here goes nothing. We'll probably still get fuel cut, but hopefully we can turn the idle down. That just blew a lot of fire at my arm. Closer, that was 290 steps. Give it 240. See what that does. Sounds a lot better. I'm going to try to do one more data log here. Name it something like stepper backward. Alright, we're logging. I'll fire it up, and that's 230 steps. And the RPM starts coming down 2300, so idling around 950, 1000. Sounding much cooler. Stepper's at 230. Yeah, okay, so I probably just wired the stepper wrong. So when I did all this stuff, I added this DB9 connector. I can probably just depin 2 of those pins and swap them and see if that does the trick. And if not, I can swap 2 more. And it's basically the bottom row of wires is what I used for my stepper motor. So let me give that a shot and see what happens here. So I disconnected the DB9 and flipped it over. I've got this tool for removing, which end removes. It's for removing pins. I believe this white side is the one that I want, but it's basically just a real thin piece of copper that goes all the way around the wire and lets you pull it out. I've got my wires all marked with like 0 dots, 1 dot, 2 dots, 3 dots, so I can tell where they end up on the other side. I'm going to swap out the first 2, 0 and 1, and we'll just test the thing without running it and see if I've improved it or not. See if it goes in when commanded in. I think we'll have this thing fixed today. There. So the pin's out. You guys ever seen these pins where there's like 4 little crimps on the thing? Right around where the wire goes into the back, there's 4 crimps on the thing. I got this kit from Amazon for crimping these closed barrel style connectors. It's from this company IAC. Maybe that makes more sense if you read it that way. IAC. Anyway. It's got all these pin removal tools. They don't go down to 20 or 22 gauge like I was hoping, but they do have a crimper that will get that low. So this crimper, I don't know if you can see in the middle, but as it squeezes, you get a crimp from all 4 sides. It squeezes in on the wire pretty good. The little depth setter didn't work with the pins that I had. I think this is meant for a Deutsch DT series connector, but for my DB9 I just had to hold it at the right spot and quick crimp and it was done. It's also got, let's see, struggle, put it in the right way. It's got a couple other crimpers. Not even sure what they're good for yet, but I assume these are the open connectors. It said one of them was good for weather pack and another one was good for the terminals. That must be the weather pack and this must be the terminals. You can tell by the shape in the crimps. But so far so good. I've only tested this one crimper so far, but it seems to be decent quality for cheap stuff. I think this was $120 altogether, which if you compare it to some of those military pin crimpers is a pretty decent deal. Got the 2 pin swap that I wanted to swap. I'll try doing another test mode. That was home. Looks like it's open. That's feeling pretty closed, so I think that'll fix that. Okay, hearing just a little bit of buzzing when I do that, so I'll try 375 for an open and see if it buzzes. It did. So I might drop that down to 380. And drop this to 370. No buzzing there. A little bit of buzz when it homes on the stop. I had all these set to 40. Let's we'll just bring those up to 80-ish. That should give it a blip of air. There you go. That should give it a blip of air when it cranks. And this I'm going to bring up to, oh, let's say 40, and we'll see if it's enough to idle. And I'm just doing this across the board. And then there was something about the time it took to come down. Crank to run taper. That seemed like a long time to me, 5 seconds. I'll just bring that down to, let's do 3 seconds. Alright, and then I'm going to save my tune. Trying to wipe up my fingers. It's got a lot of carbon in the intake when I was trying to see if the thing was moving the right way. Call this stepper pins fixed. We'll just call it stepper fixed. It's a lot of black smoke and it stinks. That worked. I'm going to change this up to 100, I think. I'll bring this up to 70, I think. Man, does that stink. Well, it seemed to like getting leaned out. So I loaded the old tune again, and I'm just going to go into the VE table and select the whole thing and see if I can multiply by, well, let's just do the idle area. I don't want to get crazy here. Let's go up to 2116, 2100. Alright, and we'll multiply by 0.7. It jumps pretty good when I start it, so I think I'll drop this down a bit. And it's idling higher now, so I'll drop this down to 60. And we'll burn that. All burned. Let's try it again. So it obviously wants to be quite a bit leaner. I'm blowing a lot of black smoke every time I touch the throttle. I don't know, I think I'm gonna go offline and play with this for a little bit and try to come back with a little bit cleaner tune, give it some time to cool off, and we'll check back. Alright, I multiplied the whole fuel table by 0.6. After leaning it out, it ran faster. So for cranking, I've got 60 steps on the idle air control. And for running, 40 steps. And that got me down to around 900 RPM, so I'll try 35. And we'll burn it, start it, and let you guys hear it. Still smells like a lot of fuel. Going to the wrong menu. There we go. Now I'm going to multiply the whole thing by 50%, so 0.5. I also want it to idle a little bit slower still, so let's bring these down to 25 and see what happens. Might be too slow to idle, but if it dies after 3 seconds, we'll know why. Still not even as slow as I wanted it to go, so try again. Just go down to 10. That still smells very rich to me, so let's do this again. Multiply by 2 to bring it back to what it was. And we'll multiply by, do 40% of the original fueling. So I got 44 in this cell. That should bring it down to less than 22. 18. My idle speed was a little higher than I like, but we'll see if it'll still run on this. I think we're getting a little bit too finicky. Alright, I don't want to change the fuel too much in the above atmospheric pressure, like in boost. I want to keep that safe, so I'll just start from 100 kPa down, and I'm going to multiply all of that by 0.5. Okay. Man, when I had my Nova, I could never get that thing to idle below about 12 or 1300 RPM, and it was just pig rich the whole time. I couldn't do enough with the Edelbrock carburetor to get it to idle any leaner without drilling the throttle blades, which I didn't want to do on a street car. This is actually quite a bit faster, so I'm liking it. The only problem is it took me 4 years to build it this far, so I can't really say it's faster than throwing a carb on a race car and going. But still interesting stuff. I lowered the cranking IAC steps down to 25, see if it won't jump up to 2800 RPM when I first start it. That looks like my RPM is like 850 right off the start. That's pretty good. Let's play it. Flipping the throttle a little bit. Sweet. What else is there to do without an exhaust and an O2 sensor? Maybe I should put this thing in the car. I mean, that's kind of the goal, right? Try a shot from a little further away to see if I get better sound quality. I don't know if I was saturating the microphone earlier. Doing a bit of surging and hunting. I think I might have leaned it out a little too far. Maybe just the idle needed leaned out. It's gonna take me a while to learn this stuff. Wondering how hot I got the coolant after all that playing around with no water in the block. 140 degrees, that is not bad. Alright, that's not really a ton of stuff done for a year's work. I connected 4 wires and swapped 2 around, and now I get to hear it idle. But I think that's a major win. I've been thinking for a long time that I had a big hole in the intake or a bad gasket, so I'm glad I was able to get it to actually idle down. The thing's smoking pretty good right now. There's a lot of stuff boiling in the engine block. The water jacket's not connected to a radiator. I hate to make promises, but I think I want to put this thing in the car, get the transmission and torque converter put together and stick it in underneath, and find a way to mount the 4L80E in this Caprice. Look for a drive shaft and be able to use my hoist to do things like oil changes and brakes on the cars that do run. Make this car run and move at least. Maybe I can drive it NA for a little while to get used to Megasquirt and then add the turbo kit. Maybe that's a waste of time and I should go straight for turbo. Let me know. Write it in the comments.